I'm here with a great panelist on my right. So we're here to talk about a very interesting topic, which is more critical than ever. It's about the newcomers and how the startups can. It's about how startups can actively contribute to transforming the needs of the French armed forces. So I'll be moderating this panel today. My name is Sabrina Barre. I'm the space project manager at Dragonfly Partners, a partner of the Paris Space Week. And, we'll be discussing, sorry, my voice is a bit off. I'll be presenting briefly our panelists, and then we'll be able to get into questions. And of course, if you have any questions, we'll be really glad to hear them. So just to put a bit of context right here. So in this context of increasing tension, the space domain, as said right before, is assuming an increasingly critical role in the defense sector. And as conflicts evolve, so do the needs of the armed forces. So there's a question that we're going to ask today. Do the needs of the armed forces, are they influenced by startups? Do startups drive innovation and the needs, or is it the other way around? So the chicken or the egg theory, basically. And so before diving in this topic, I'll just briefly introduce our panelists. We have Philippe de Dobler on my right, who's a general officer of the French forces and an expert in digital and space transformation. You contributed to the French defense space strategy as the deputy to the French Space Command. And you've led the armed forces digital strategy within the general staff. So thank you, Philippe, for being here today with us. Sylvain Bataillard, you are the current chief strategy officer at Hyperspace. You were a test and system engineer at ATR and Iron Group, and you co-founded Hyperspace in 2018. And eventually, last but not least, Pierre Bertrand, you're the CEO of Skynopy, and you have a degree in engineering and studied at Centrale Supélec and MIT, and you were also a project manager at OneWeb and France program director at L'Hôpital. Thank you, Pierre, for being here today. So to get this discussion flowing, I'll start with Philippe, because you're our military side of the panel. According to you, what are the main challenges that the armed forces face today regarding space and digital capabilities?
Yeah, it's okay. So I am going to try to speak slowly, because in fact, regularly I speak very fast. The key issue for the forces is to acquire and maintain superiority. And in order to be the best, the better than the adversary. I mean, for that, you must always reduce the decisional loop, the OODR loop, which means observation, orientation, decision, action. And for that, in fact, it's necessary in order to have the digital and also the spatial superiority. And as you know, digital field and also spatial field is omnipresent, are omnipresent in order to make operations. That's why we must have the digital and spatial superiority in order to have the operational superiority. And for that, what we must do is to be more agile in order to acquire, but also to exploit, to operate the digital and the spatial assets. You must also note that physical, spatial, and also digital environments are more and more contested, and especially in high intensity conflict. And that's why we have a lot of challenges in spatial and also digital fields. Among them, permanence, resilience, availability, agility, reactivity, adaptation, duality, hybridation. We must also control all the assets in order to, and also of course the security and the defense in order to be able to have a spatial and digital superiority in order to be able to have the operational superiority.
Yeah, very interesting. So that obviously, I think, calls for response. So on the startup side, Hyperspace and Skynopy, Sylvain and Pierre, how do you think your technologies to enhancing this operational effectiveness and resilience, as mentioned by Philippe?
All right. So at Skynopy, we're doing ground station as a service. So we have like a a global network of ground antenna that we can put together to serve our customers who are most of the time in low Earth orbit operating satellites. And so instead of having these customers buying and installing their own ground station and not using them 100% of the time, we're like selling a service and a service of antenna time. And we're going one step further. We are selling connectivity as a service. So basically, if you will, we're putting like a kind of SIM card on board of these satellites to operate the full connectivity data link and expand the performance, connectivity performance of these low Earth orbit missions. And I think I like this introduction because if the armed forces are seeking superiority through resilience, you said, and agility, it's exactly where we act. Because instead of just having your patrimonial and your assets on the ground, you can leverage a network that is highly scalable of antenna and divide your revisit time, your latency, data latency, and extend your data volume that you can download from your satellites. In that sense, Skynopi, we believe, is like a good partner because in just 10 months, we were able to expand our network of ground station by 10 antenna, in just like by 15 antenna, sorry, just in 10 months. And we have this technology that scale very fast across the globe.
Thank you. So at Hyperspace, we are building basically a new propulsion technology, which is simpler, which means cheaper. So the aim is to have a launch capability using our technology in order to lower costs of access to space. So this is where the interest lies for the armed forces. Because we aim to lower cost of access to space and to have a higher frequency of launch capability at a lower cost. I think an interesting point in the first question was what are the challenges for the armed forces? And I think for the space domain, one of the challenges is to switch from an old space model, if I can say old space, to a new space model, which means shorter decision-making loops, shorter design loops, production loops, and operational loops. Which means if I, contrary to having a few bigger satellites that are launched on a very heavy launcher that do not launch very often, such as Ariane or Vega, the idea, I think, is to have a more smaller satellites, which needs frequent launch capabilities. That's where Hyperspace brings a cheaper technology to put all those satellites into space to, for instance, replace satellites from a constellation, or even answer a very short notice need to have a satellite which has an orbit optimized for a specific region, which needs to be sent in the next few days or weeks for following a specific event. And this is really the reactivity capability that brings what we are developing at Hyperspace.
Okay, so now we talked about how your companies can meet the current needs of the armed forces, which is a first step. But maybe like open question, how would you perceive the role of startups in, let's say, supporting the development of new defense requirements, creating new needs?
I would say that startups have two big qualities. The first of all is to be able to be innovative, to have innovations. And I would say they are able to think out of the box. And it's very important in order to, in fact, to have superiority, is to be different and to find new means in order to have superiority. The second quality is to be able to be very fast, to develop or to develop, to build something new with a very fast, fulgurant process. And it's the other forces of startups, because in order to have superiority, you must be innovative, in order to be different, but also if you discover a new means, you must develop this very fast in order to be stronger than the adversary.
And okay, maybe I will add something. I think that we often oppose like big corporation and startups. I just believe that sometimes they're doing different products, some or services. Sometimes they can do the same service, but startups can sometimes sell services that big corporation cannot. And I will give you here an example that I lived. So I used to work for OneWeb Satellites, which was the joint venture of Airbus and OneWeb. And we designed this like assembly line being able to produce 2 satellites per day for OneWeb, but the goal was to sell these satellites massively to other companies. And the cost structure and the finance structure of this big corporation that is Airbus was not enabling it to sell these satellites to small companies just willing, like just wanting 1, 2, or 20 satellites. Airbus selling these satellites and assembly line capacity was just interested to sell like mega constellation. While like when you look at it in the market, there is like currently 2 mega constellation, is OneWeb, and the other was the competitor was Starlink. So there was no market for it. While after that I joined Loft Orbital, who was a company doing like ride-share and ride-sharing satellites, and we were the one being able to go seek Airbus and say, okay, we're gonna buy your satellites and we're gonna share the space between like different customers on board of your satellite. And at the end of the day, it was a startup, Loft Orbital, who was able to leverage the capacity of this assembly line and selling it. So my point was that sometimes it's just the cost or capital structure of big corporation that does not enable us to sell some services. And it's where startups are interesting for example, the armed forces.
I would like to emphasize another point is risk-taking. The startups are here, their reason to live and to be here is to take risks. Higher risks than what a big and established corporation would have taken. Maybe to venture in a new technological way that has never been visited before, and the aim is to for a startup is to take risks and to really to go all in this technological possibility, something that big groups and big corporations cannot really do because they can't how to say they can't fail, big companies. But startups accept this risk. Maybe they will fail, maybe they will succeed, and if they will succeed, it will be a really big success. But for this reason, they will go all in, and there will be very less inertia and internal politics compared to big companies. And this is which will allow startups to move really fast into a technological direction. Maybe the wrong technological direction, but at least we will know that this is maybe not the technological direction that will succeed, and we'll choose another. But I think this is really, the difference relies really in the risk-taking capabilities.
You? Yes, I totally agree with you, because in fact, take risk. We know it in the French MOD that we must more and more take risk. But in fact, mindsets, it's difficult to change mindsets. And the best way to change it is to be gather with startups who had this mindset. And little by little, we know that in the French MOD know, for example, that he must have in his process the fact that we must be able to take more risks.
And so, based on this discussion, and maybe Philippe, starting from your military side, what are well, we've seen that there are there are advantages to working with startups based on, like, let's say, risk taking and they're better, let's say, built to go faster and they're more agile. But what are the challenges? Because there are, of course, challenges of the collaboration between startups and the MOD.
Yes, for me the big challenge is in fact to know each other. What I mean, in fact, you have big societies, big industrial, for example, Thales, Airbus, etc., which know very well MOD. And in fact, the ecosystem formed by the startups must know the French MOD as the big society knows the French MOD. And in fact, I would say that this challenge must be separated into two challenges. In fact, MOD must adapt its process in order to allow startups to be efficient with the MOD, and at the same time, the startup must better know our MOD process in order to be more efficient with him. It's, I think, a key issue in order to be more efficient together.
Yes, I think, first of all, I completely agree with the fact that for a startup, the MOD is really a huge machine with a lot of people, a lot of different contracts. You don't really know where, who to see and where their offices are. It's quite complicated to navigate in this. And another fact is that I think the time scale is not perceived the same between a ministry, between the MOD and a startup. For me at Hyperspace, 6 months is an eternity. Everything can happen in 6 months, good or bad. We can develop completely a new technology, address a new market, have new contacts, have some exports, or have one fundraising. So the company can change completely in 6 months, whereas for the MOD, in 6 months, things can happen, but not at the same scale. So sometimes there is a difficulty for the MOD to adapt the level of conversation, of exchange with a startup as quickly as the startup grows. I think that's one of the challenges, especially regarding the maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the partnership, the contracts. For example, you start talking with one person responsible for small subsidies. The time the subsidies is in place and you get your contract, it's almost not relevant anymore to your company because you've raised tens of millions and the company size tripled. So yeah, okay, you've got subsidies, but it's not as relevant as it was 6 months before. So it's the difference between agility, for me, the main difficulty.
Yeah, I will just confirm this. Like, I think speed of execution for a startup who are like most of the time run by cash and like the cash run that we have, and yeah, 6 months seems an eternity for us. So it's and most of the time, startups are ready to deliver fast and to contractualize fast, and so yeah, this adaptation I think is like needed.
To bounce on that, since Hyperspace was created, is older than Skylopi technically for a few years, it was created in 2018. Have you felt a shift in the way you've collaborated with the MOD? Is it faster in the last 6 years, or not at all?
Yes, I think really there are still progress to do, but I think we are really on the good path. First of all, with the creation of a Defense Innovation Agency, with people really who have more who deal with innovative startups every day. So it's more easy for them, I think, to shift the mindset, and also I think. If you heard the speech of the Ministry of Armed Forces a few weeks ago, he really emphasized the the need for innovation, for disruption, for having dealing with smaller companies, and to maybe change a little bit the way we are the contracts are being done. So I think we are really on the good path, and it's really encouraging, I think.
That went by really fast. That's a bit weird. Okay, maybe then just to sum up and to follow up on what was Sylvain was saying, Pierre and Philippe, how can you think these challenges could better be addressed in the future? How can you enhance startup MOD collaboration?
What I said just before is to be able to be more closer each other. And for example, in fact, in the past, for example, in the space field, in Toulouse, there is a building, the B612, where there are a lot of startups, and there is also an office of the French Space Command, and I think it's a good way to be more linked, but it's not enough. I mean that in order to be more efficient, what the French MOD want to do now is to be more closer with process and also with organization. That's why in the 2430 programming law, he decided to build a new model with digital and also digital and space model by creating, for example, center where we can gather operational procurement agencies, so of course MOD, but also all industrial. I mean big industrial, but also startups. And we must find a new model. I don't talk about a partnership, private-public partnership. It's not the case, but a new model where the startups are really linked with the operational in order to develop very quickly something. And we think, I'm not a military now, but we think it's possible to find a new way.
I'm also super confident because we do see like advanced countries putting a lot more trust in startups, such as like the US, at least in the ground station as a service model. Our competitors in the US have been granted like huge contract with the US DoD, so showing that it works. I also believe that something that can help would be to reinsure the armed forces, to explain the success stories in the past. I think there've been like a lot of success stories in the US, obviously, but also in France. I think like there've been some success story for example like Preligent startup that was like kind of the path leader in the startup world to work with the French armed forces, or on the reverse, like to show the stories that were actually not success stories and understand why. And maybe this like analysis would show that maybe like we're all winners. It's like a win-win situation if we like trust more these new services provided by startup.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the image of startups is really changing in the MOD. I think a few years ago it was more less trust, but more and more they get to trust us a little bit more. And just about what could be improved, I've got a specific example regarding financing, because as you said, in a startup, cash is king. There is really the only thing that matters is cash, because we need to pay our engineers at the end of the month, and the rest is secondary. And I think currently, for example, if I want a contract with a small contract with DGA, there will either small subsidies, or it will be a big armament program, and it's a bit too steep between those steps. We need more granularity, more possibility for increasing contract value, increasing engagement. We need more steps, but I think we are going in a good direction. And also, I didn't mention it before, but it's not only, I mean, cash is important, but there is also another kind of support. For example, at Hyperspace, we benefited from the test infrastructures of the DGA next to Bordeaux. And I think it was the first time that, yes, it was the first time that the startup got to test really an engine, and a big engine, 1 meter diameter, 6 meters long. So if we wanted to test this, our new propulsion technology in our facilities, well, we couldn't. So DGA was there to help us and to put to lend us their infrastructure and their expertise, and they really helped us, and we wouldn't be there if they weren't there. So there is different ways to help startups, I think.
Yeah, Hyperspace is a great example, and kind of P2 of how MOG and startup collaboration can actually be successful. Maybe just to one last question, really quickly. According to you, do startups drive defense needs, or the other way around? To sum up this discussion.
The question, please.
Do startups drive defense needs, or do the defense, do the armed forces bring in the innovation?
In the two ways. I mean that nowadays, in fact, we know that forces always have needs, but we know that the needs come from the startups because they have no ideas, and in fact we must think in order to solve how we can use new technologies without having thinking before the operational issues.
Yeah, I would say like both. Like it depends on like which services or products startups can like unblock or like go faster on some, like for example the digital world. We saw that startups were particularly agile or like knowledgeable about that, while like the armed forces like know their needs, exact needs, and sometimes you as a startup you always need to say, okay, I can provide the service, but then you need this time of discussion with the armed forces to say, okay, here's your actual need, and so I need to adapt my service to better fit your need.
Yeah, exactly, and I think it goes both ways, because sometimes, for example, the armed forces will have, or the DGA, yeah, we have these specific needs, and here are the technology we were using before, so this specific need is not yet met. What could we do to fill this gap? And then you arrive with your technology and you say, hey, maybe I think we could fill this need with my technology. What do you think about that? And so you answer their needs, but in a way they did not have anticipated before, because you are developing something new. So I think it goes really both ways.
I agree. Clearly, that's the right way to think of it. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you for being here. We'll be taking maybe like 5 to 10 minutes question if we have some in the public. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I've got a question for Mr. Sylvain Bataillard. You spoke about the low-costness because you have building your own propulsion system, but I didn't understood, for example, what concurrential advantage you have, like regarding, for example, compared to Latitude, which is also on low cost and high launch capabilities. So what? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So at Hyperspace, we are developing a new propulsion technology based on hybrid propulsion. So hybrid propulsion in itself is not new, but we are developing a new architecture allowing to break through the technological barrier of hybrid, which makes an engine that we can throttle, we can turn it on and off, and without turbopumps. I think this is the best example. Why is it cheaper? There is no turbopumps. It's really an engine with 20 basic parts, basically. So that's the way we cut cost. And also the idea, I think, something differentiator from all the micro launcher companies we have in France, in Europe, in the world, is that since I bring a new propulsion technology to the table, Of course, there is a use case for launcher, but there is a use case also for other types of vehicles that the armed forces would be, I think, interested in. So this is also a differentiator.
I have a question regarding, the articulation between the MOD and the startups. You mentioned that it was a question of ecosystem. There was a question of understanding the MOD, the DGA, its structure, etc. When we look at the way the US is organized, they have very structured program. I'm thinking of, for instance, the US Navy. In terms of innovation, they spot startups and then they embed them into very structured programs with milestones whereby they check that their roadmap is actually delivered with grants and also some commitments in terms of services purchase, procurement. So of course, that has a benefit because it strictly channels the startup's activity into a very structured roadmap, jointly defined. It comes, of course, with constraints, but it also brings a visibility in terms of resources, financial resources, which itself can be virtuous in terms of VC funding, attractivity of talents, etc., etc. Do you have something like this with French MOD? Is it in the pipe? What's your view?
I am a former military, but in fact it is in the pipe. I mean that the willing of the French MOD is to do the same thing that US. For example, I have a special experience when I was in a space command. In fact, in US, you have, for example, I don't remember the name of the operation, but three times a year, US Space Command gather startups and also big societies in order to improve space SSA assets, and so they tell all the startups, so I want to do that. And in 1 month, they work together. And in fact, in order to be able to do that, you must have a lot of things. For example, to be able to buy something very fast, to be able to decide, I mean that you must accept that the people at the MOD, who will be with the startup, to decide, okay, your assets is very good, I take it, and I buy it. And I think that it's a very, very big challenge, but because we must change all of that. In France, for example, when you want to buy something, you must know that you want to buy something. You must know what it is. Or, in fact, sometimes you don't know it. So it's totally different. Another thing, our process, it's a yearly process. With the budget, it's a yearly process, and it is a purely annual process. We must change all of that. We must, for example, accept to have a flow of finance without knowing what we are going to buy. It's all things we must change. It's a big challenge, but it was my fight when I was in the forces, and it is in the pipe.
Maybe I will just add something like with the analogy with the US. I think like there is some inspiration to have, but we also have to remind that like our DoD budget and market are like by no comparison with the one of the US, and that's where like maybe I'm sparking a debate here, but like the idea of like a defense for Europe with like a much bigger budget and market is key for startup, because even though we can start with like collaboration with the French DoD and like with projects that are very important, at the end of the day, we're like gonna face this wall of like the maximum budget that we can get and actually the maximum market that we can get. And it's where I think for startup and innovative service, having like a more easier to access market for the European defense is also interesting. Maybe on the second step, but like it's key.
One last question.
Yeah, hello there. It's a similar point, but I mean the three words that have come across in the talk have been agility, have been risk taking, and have clearly been funding. Now, if you're looking at funding, of course, it's in the VC space that you get the agility, and the appetite for risk taking in the VC space is relatively large when you're at a seed stage, maybe Series A, Series B. But as you get to that scale up area, and exactly the problem that was raised on the panel when you're looking at MOD funding, the appetite for risk taking goes down as the numbers go up and you start moving from VC into private equity. Now, staying within the private space, what do you think can happen within the sector so that you can de-risk some of that scale up funding to the extent that those funders with bigger pockets are prepared to take bigger risks on your organizations?
Can you just rephrase the last sentence, maybe like, and speak louder?
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. The question really was, what do you think you can do within your sector to de-risk it so that the funders, the private funders with deeper pockets who've got more money, are prepared to take bigger risks on smaller organizations?
I would say by itself, like a startup, like when you talk to, you need to convince customers or investors, you kind of always have to demonstrate that you already have other investors and you already have like customers. So I think de-risking a company is basically showing that you have commercial traction beside like armed forces, and you already have like investors that trust you already and were willing to take that risk. And maybe the last pillar that I haven't mentioned is like the technology and being able to demonstrate this technology by like any type of means. Like on our case, for example, it was like to be able in just like 1 year connect to like 15 antenna all over the world and operate satellites on a daily basis. So speed of execution, basically.
Yeah, just to go in a way, I think on the technological aspect, it's really important to have a roadmap, a clear roadmap with maybe small steps, but to show really that you have progress and you go towards the direction you want, and that you will bring a technology that does not already exist, I think.
Last question.
Thank you. This question for Pierre. You mentioned that in your solutions you have a spaceborne component, which is proper to your technology. Could you first elaborate a bit more on that? And then the second one is when you want to cater for the Space Force's needs, do you have a dedicated solution for that, which would entail encryption or really which is specified for the MODs, and the specific line of business for that, because civil and military are not sometimes working together.
Okay. So when we created Canopy, we saw that the market, so all of the satellite operators in low Earth orbit, were basically using 50% of their data link capacity. Said differently, they were paying like twice the price that they should pay, or they were like just like downloading half of the data they should be able to download. And this is because they're not configuring super well like the data link. The data link is like a spaceborne component and the ground station. And today, besides Canopy, the market is just providing antenna time, so just like ground antenna time. So what we provide, it's called the connectivity kit, is basically like we are providing the firmware and the configuration layer of the spaceborne component, which is like the onboard radio and onboard antenna. That other suppliers will provide, such as like in France there is like Anywave, Searlinks, other companies like this. And so we're partnering with all of the market supplier of radio and onboard antenna to configure their kits and to take the maximum of the data link. And so that's why we call it like kind of a SIM card. For your second question, so we're already operating like a global network of stations, and we have a sub-network that is more like, that is maximizing the sovereignty. It's, I think, fake to say, oh, I have a fully like sovereign solution, because it's always when you dig into like which like component is from which country, is like very tough to be like fully sovereign. But the sub part of our network that is sovereign is using French antenna placed on a European and like a French overseas, and we're using like a French connectivity kit. So we have like this whole like data link, and it also fits for European countries willing to have like sovereign solutions, because these days the bigger risk is basically like extraterritorial laws that allows you to take the data from other countries. The case in point is like the US Cloud Act, so it's like focusing on the cloud, so that's why we use like a Secnum Cloud for this solution.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you for your questions, and thank you very much for your interesting insights today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.